Hey, this is Lorena, and I wanted to do a video for you on how I'm resolving an issue of my back fabric. And I also wanted to share what happened when I thought I ruined a client's quilt. Yeah, I thought you'd like this video on how I'm trying to figure out how this will never happen to me again. We're just gonna kind of talk about some of the things I'm trying to do to implement when people do back fabrics like this one, where they put different, like a strip here, a solid here, and a strip there. I've been having some problems with it, and I'm going to share with you some of the things that I'm trying to do to make sure that the quilt comes out beautifully. The issue is shrinkage. As you quilt a row, the quilt kind of takes up. It could take up, depending on the density of the quilting, maybe 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 of an inch, or even 2/3, 1/3 of an inch, 2/3 of an inch, maybe even an inch, okay? And so depending on how densely quilted the quilt is, there is this kind of shrinkage that happens. Now let me also share this. That's why your long armers ask you to give them 4 to 6 inches of width and of length to accommodate, one, that shrinkage, and also to accommodate, you know, it rolls crooked, and so you're accommodating for factors that you don't expect. So one of the factors that I've been having problems with, if I just quilt this on the vertical, because right now I have this on the horizontal, is that placing, as you're rolling the quilt, it shrinks up, and you want to make sure that you have it placed right here. So I found if you lay your quilt on the horizontal, is that you can physically know where the placement will be from this end, and you can use it as a guideline. I have the choice of where I want to put it because I can control it without dealing with take up. So I found this is a great solution. So let me get this ready. I don't have, this client didn't give me a lot of back fabric, so I have to be very careful that I put this quilt top to the very edge here, and I have to be very careful with how much quilting I'm gonna put on this quilt because I don't want it to take up that much. If it takes up maybe 1/2 inch per row, it'll only shrink 1.5 inches, which I will have enough back fabric. If it shrinks more, I will be short back fabric, and you don't want that. So because I know I don't have a lot of fabric, I went ahead and I used, it's not as dense of a quilting design on each row, so that it doesn't take up as much. I also made sure that I butted the fabric to the very edge of the leader, so it's giving me about 1/2 inch extra, which that's going to be where I trim and binding, because I literally only have 62 inches of back fabric, and this, the width or length of this is 61. And then if I would have quilted a lot of quilting on here, I may have not had enough space. Putting the leaders on the vertical, usually the vertical, I'll put a leader here on the very top, and I'll put one at the bottom. Like I would put a leader on this end. But since I did this, I'm learning if you put it on the horizontal, you'll have better placement control, especially if you're not using a directional pattern when you're putting the quilt top and placing it on these seams, these two seams, this seam or this seam. Just recently I did a beautiful Cuddles minky kind of quilt, and I literally added about 6 extra inches of back fabric, and I ended up being short because of the shrinkage. And it has horizontal seams. This fabric stretches a lot. So what I'm doing is I'm using this to pull the fabric taut and down, and to make sure that this horizontal seam is straight. And you can't see the quilting really, but I'm just quilting it. Not overstretching it, like you can't even see, but kind of like to keep it straight, just like that. Don't overstretch it either. This is the design that I'm quilting. But I messed up. I thought 6 inches would be enough back fabric extra on right and left and on the length. And on the cuddles, on the horizontal, it shrunk up so much that I recommend to tell your clients if they bring you cuddles or minky quilts to have 10 extra inches because of shrinkage and how it shrinks in on its own, and also how the quilting will shrink the quilt. Yeah. All right, so decorating your back fabric is a great thing to do. I understand why people do it. They want it reversible. But I want you to know you're complicating the life of your long armor a little bit more, which is okay. You know, she's here for you. She's here to do the best job for you. But there's some factors you have to pay attention to. For example, this client ended up giving me 2 quilts. I am so happy that I did it the way I did it. What happened, it has a label on the very bottom, and if I would have placed this quilt to the very top of this border, I think I would have missed the label. Really high up on this back seam. The reason I did it backwards is because she put the label before she finished the quilt. So I kind of quilted the quilt backwards. So instead of quilting it from the top, I quilted it from the bottom down to the top, which it gave me the ability to find placement for the label. If I would have done it the opposite way, this would have been on the bottom and I may have missed the label, and then I would have, or just sewn on half of the label. That would have just been stupid. So then she gave me this other quilt, and on this quilt, the back fabric also had a label, an embroidered name on it, and it had a panel that went across. So this back fabric has like a lot. It has a label and the child's name. The back fabric has Star Wars and all this stuff on it. So instead of putting the leaders on the vertical, because I want to make sure that where I lay the quilt down, it also catches the label like on the other quilt, I'm putting this on the horizontal with the label on the top. Do you see that? On the top. Let's say I put the quilt, give or take here. Usually I don't take it too close. But then I would have missed the label and the name that she put on the back. Well, when I measured everything, if I would have measured the center panel where she decorated it, we would have missed the label by about 3 or 4 inches. I also need to make sure that it's not off from here. And so I felt having the label and the embroidered name that she put was more important than focusing on the center panel. Well, I placed the quilt and aligned it as much as I possibly could. I basted everything down. I knew that that panel, I may end up cutting off a little bit of the black or a little bit of the edge, but I thought it'd be okay. I basted it down. It was great, but I forgot one thing. Shrinkage. Dun, dun, dun. Trying to deal with every factor I possibly could. Is the label in a good spot? Yes. Is the embroidery name placed? Yes. Is that center panel as much as I possibly could centered? Yes. Did you baste it and make sure it's nice and placed? Yes. But I forgot shrinkage. And then I ended up having to trim off part of the client's design because it shrunk. So I felt like I ruined this client's quilt. I could unstitch the whole quilt. I could, I wanted to cry. It's not a major mistake. It doesn't look horrible, but it's not exactly what the client wanted. And I'm not giving them what they want. And because I'm not giving them what they want, I don't feel comfortable charging them for something they're not happy with. But she didn't care. She was completely happy with it. But I was like, are you sure? Just think about stuff that could happen that you don't expect to happen when you're working for people. Be mindful of that. And thank God she wasn't crazy, because I've had some crazy ones. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you on the next one. All right, bye.